another episode of Talking Grassroots, episode 2. I feel like we're on a roll, mate. We've actually managed to get 2 in a row done pretty quickly. I'm your host, Ricky Ettridge, and with me is my co-host and my right-hand man at Halfback Digital Media, Ricky Logan. Welcome today, mate.
Matt, thanks for having me. It's good to be here. Good to get stuck into some more footy talk.
Now, we're going to get straight into today, mate. We're not going to piss fight around because something that every year I feel like this is a massive talking point in local footy. But for some reason, I just feel like this off-season, this topic could take this whole episode, because I feel like this off-season, it's read his head again, which is fine. But it feels like it's just a bit more focus on it this year. And that's talking about the salary caps and the points system in local footy.
Yeah, I think it's getting pretty out of hand, isn't it? With some of the stuff that's going on, and there's been some compliance officers appointed to try and work out what is going on with salary cap breaches and things, and there has been some clubs that are now going to get penalties dealt to them for salary cap breaches.
Well, you speak of that, and I think it was Wangaratta last season actually had their 2022 flag stripped off them for salary cap, or 2023 flag stripped off them for salary cap breaches.
Yeah, so they actually fined $28,000, lost 4 points, and couldn't earn premiership points from the first 2 rounds. So basically 2 losses in their first 2 games for the next season, which, yeah, it's probably a fair penalty when you're, cheating the salary cap to win games, to win grand finals. But I think more to the point is some of these salary caps are getting a bit out of hand. We're talking local football here, and you're talking about a salary cap of 130,000, 100 plus, not being enough money to pay players. That's crazy to me.
All right, so you want to talk about salary caps. Now, I've got here just country league to begin with, and we'll shift into Metro shortly. When we shift into Metropolitan, we'll also actually discuss points, like the salary cap increase. So these are the top 6 country leagues. So at number 6 is the Sunraysia League, and they're only in here because I don't quite understand how these caps work, because they're 105,000 to 126,000 for a season. So I'm not too sure how.
Is that the bottom division 105?
Well, it's only one division, so that's why I don't really quite understand how that works. The Gippsland League out in Gippsland, 125,000. Bendigo, 125,000. A lot of money. Central Murray, again, I'm not too sure how that works, 105 to 135,000. And then the Goulburn Valley League and the Ovens and Murray League are both 130,000, except for Karratha Rutherglen, who will get 155,000 due to being in recess in 2023. And they play in the northeast border. Now, that's a lot of money to be thrown around to be on the books.
Yeah, so let's say 18-round season, and I'm not counting finals here. I'm just saying 18 rounds. You're looking at what? It's over $6,000 for most teams. $6,000. Divide that by 22 players. 6. Let's go 6,000. Divide that over your 22. That's $275. Less $272 per player you could be paying, and some of these guys are getting well above that,
and some of these blokes getting well below that.
And I'm sure there's a lot getting well below that, but $270 to go play footy, mate.
But that's the issue, and this is where the discussion about clubs not staying within salary caps comes from. Is that $275? Was it?
272, yeah.
$272 a player, right? Yet you'll be having blokes that are probably getting close to 1 to 1.5 a game, and you've probably got a handful over 500 a game. So that's, even if you only give some players, the bottom players $50 a game, that still doesn't quite add up to that amount of money.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be some creative accounting going on, and there was an article earlier last year, this year. That's, some of the creative ways teams are getting around the salary caps, which I think further just proves that the salary cap doesn't really work.
No. Yeah, you hear the stories of signing on bonuses, which apparently don't count towards the salary cap, which is fair enough. I sort of understand that, but that's sort of a way to get around it, because you can say to a bloke, I'm going to give you a signing bonus, but you're going to cop it across a 22-week period, which that straight away becomes effectively a player payment. And then you have stories of other clubs that will I just want to point this out. We don't know of any club that actually do this. We're not speaking from something that we've been told from someone we know within the club. This is just stuff that you hear speculate.
This is stuff we read on Big Footy.
Yeah, Big Footy, and no, you read stuff on Big Footy, mate. I reckon it'd be worse than that. But yeah, the stuff that you sort of read on, like the posts on the socials and stuff like that, and you've sort of got to take it with a little bit of grain of salt. But you've also got to sort of look at it as this could be possible, because when you hear it more than 3 times, it does start to become a little bit okay. Could be something here. The other thing that I've read clubs can do is they'll go out and get a sponsor. So, say for example, you bring in a halfback digital media sponsor, their sponsorship, say $30,000 for the season, comes at $30,000 straight into the club as a sponsor. That $30,000 straight into the player's pocket for their player payments, and it just straight away, it's not a player payment because it's just a sponsorship, but it's just been shifted. Then you hear in the country, new cars, and I think a big one which I don't think is an issue personally. I think it's probably good for the country, is that you hear blokes that sort of live metropolitan, might get recruited out the country clubs and get shifted out. They get put up in a house and get a job. And yes, that is sort of dodging the player payment system in a way, but it's also helping out a local country community. So it's sort of a double-edged sword, that one.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things like you're talking about clubs like Yea and Broadford that are trying to, they're coming back from recess, going into recess. How do they get young blokes into those areas? Well, if they've got a company that needs a few chippies or a couple brickies or whatever that happens to be handy at football as well, you're going to have to do those sorts of things to get the blokes into the areas. Because let's be honest, 15, 16-year-old kid that's growing up in a country town then starts getting pretty decent at footy and wants to do, potentially go AFL or have a football career. His parents look and go, well, I've got to get him down to a private school. I've got to get him down to the Geelong Footy Factory or, all these types of places, because they're not going to get recruited from Yea or Broadford or, pick a team anywhere. These, so people move out of the areas, out of country areas to more metropolitan things to get these kids into better schools and stuff to give them opportunities.
And the other thing I find I've always found weird is the country clubs that will have players that live 3 hours away that are just travel up for the game, or you've even got fly-in players that will live in a state and clubs are paying for them to fly down. Like, I'm going to assume clubs are paying airfare. That's not going towards the salary cap. But speaking of the top 6 country leagues, mate, these are the bottom 6 country leagues. And I found this quite strange and quite amazing how this works. So the Omeo district has the lowest salary cap, which is $30,000, and they're in Gippsland. But the Gippsland Football League in Gippsland have got the 5th highest salary cap in the country, in Victoria. Second lowest is Upper Murray, which is $37,500 a year. And again, that's northeast border is Ovens and Murray League. So the league with the highest salary cap in the same region has a league with the second lowest salary. Almost $100,000 difference in salary cap for those two things. And just on that, obviously potentially probably the towns that are there makes sense probably why the caps are so low. Example, maybe clubs in Upper Murray don't have as many businesses around to generate $130,000 in salary caps. But the issue with that is if a club in Upper Murray did have that potential to raise $130,000 for salary cap and try and play with the big boys in Upper Murray, their hands are tied because of the salary cap.
Yeah, it sort of makes it hard for those teams to grow, doesn't it? If they are sort of, they got clubs that are bordering on other clubs that have got four times the salary cap of them. It makes it harder for those teams to expand and grow their player base.
I'm sure, not being fully across how these leagues do it being so far away, I'm sure that it's something where the clubs have voted on keeping caps low enough. Then the Millawa District, 42,000. Ovington King, again in the northeast border, 55,000. Colac District in the Barwon, 60,000. And then East Gippsland, North Gippsland, and Mid Gippsland are all 64,000, and they're based in the Gippsland League. So a couple of the Gippsland leagues, well, 4 of Gippsland leagues in the bottom 6, yet 1 league in the top 5.
Yeah, it's quite a big difference between some of these leagues, and I think over the next couple of years there's going to be a lot of work done between all the Vic Country and Vic Metro leagues in trying to get some parity between the leagues, because obviously if you've got a club that's got a cap of 130, 2 towns over from a cap that's got a club that's got a cap of 30, how are they ever going to compete with each other? And you can't recruit players without paying them to these areas, some of these areas. And that's tough. It's tough to raise 30,000, but it's even tougher to raise 130,000. Imagine being a bottom team in a league that's paying 130,000 and you can't even raise 50.
Yeah.
How do those clubs compete?
It does make it difficult when you're trying to, and as I think you could have an absolute gun player from your local town, but if you can't pay him what a club, merely 2 towns over out that way could be 2 hours drive, but if you can't offer them as much what a town could, an hour away, they're going to probably travel that hour to play because they're going to get a bit more cash.
Yeah, and reading a lot of the comments in the Herald Sun articles about this salary caps and players' points is the thing that comes up a lot. And a lot of people say, stuff the salary caps, scrap them all together, and just focus on getting the players' points rise. I don't agree with scrapping salary caps altogether because that could open a whole Pandora's box there. But I think players' points is something that needs to be really assessed and looked at big time.
Before we get into player points, I've got here how they all work. I understand the thought process behind scrap salary caps. They're pointless because, let's be honest, in a way they are. They can be pointless if clubs are good enough to dodge them. The issue is if you get rid of salary caps, you're going to have so many clubs fold under financial strain because they can just spend whatever they want. So instead of having to sort of try and be like, okay, we've got to try and keep this under wraps, if there's no salary cap and you've got someone comes in your club, that owns 25 businesses, a multi-millionaire who sits there and goes, all right, I'm going to build a dynasty here. I'm going to pay $300,000, $400,000 a year at local footy and win this club 5 premierships in a row. Great, does it, brings in all these players. Your points, he keeps his points intact, wins 5 premierships in a row. After 5 years, he turns around and goes, I'm done, see you later, take my money with me. They've all of a sudden got to try and raise that money back up. All the clubs that don't have the money will overspend for that success, don't get success, money runs out, clubs can't pay bills.
Yeah, and that's a big problem with local sport, isn't it? In our local area, something happened with a cricket team that was doing something very similar, where a guy's come in with a lot of money and was bringing a lot of money into this club to bring in international players to come play cricket for him and all this, and it turned out he was money laundering. He was breaking the law to make this money to bring this club just to be a big dick swinger at his cricket club, which is outrageous that some local cricket club is getting involved in a bloke who's laundering money. But that could happen. Yeah. That could happen to other clubs because if you're a president, if you're on a committee of a club and someone came to you and said, I can give you $200,000 to spend on players,
you're not going to...
How are you going to say no to that?
You're going to ask two questions. What do you want in return and when can we get it?
Yeah.
That's two questions you're going to ask. You're not going to... Because a lot of clubs nowadays, even though there's so much money being flung around in local footy, a lot of clubs are still sort of break-even clubs.
Oh, definitely. There's, some of the better clubs in Southern that are up there in Division 1. They're not ending the year in a 100,000 surplus. They're managing their books to keep them going year in, year out, having enough to recruit players. They might lose one higher paid player, so it gives them, they then got to recruit somebody else. But you also got to overpay players at certain points. If you're a lower club, you got to overpay players to attract them to your club. Yep. So and that happens a lot. You get players that aren't worth the money that you're paying them. Happens in AFL. There's guys that are on contracts that they're not worth that money, but because you're a bottom team, you're trying to recruit somebody who's looked as the next big star, but it didn't turn out that way. So
yeah, and I think you say that a lot. You say blokes sort of being like, oh, he's asked for this much money. You sort of scratch your head and go, how is he worth that much money? And it's two things. It's you said they try and demand a bit more than what they're probably worth because they're going to a lesser club, so they probably think they deserve more money. And the flip side is they got another club who's got that much money, who their bottom tier players they pay more than, because of salary caps, their bottom tier players they pay more than the lower club's highest paid players, so they can play them off against each other and they can make an extra $100, even though they're probably not even the top 15 players, and what they would be playing another team that they're the top 3 players.
Yeah, and I think this is not a new problem.
No.
This is not something that just started happening in the last few years. It's been going on since the first time somebody got a brown paper bag and gave somebody some cash. There's been guns for hire for a long time, and there's names you can throw out of football players that you won't even realise how many different clubs they've played for over their journey, because they're just year in, year out, they go to the next club that's going to pay them the same amount they'll get or more than what they were getting before. And they, that obviously as years goes on, those guys aren't going to be worth as much, but the next club's going to pay it because he kicked 70 goals last year and we struggle to kick a goal this year. So we need someone like that.
Do you think, so as I said, this has come up probably every year for the last 5 years, this sort of comes up. But it's really only been sort of maybe the last 1 or 2 seasons where it's been a bit more heavily written about. Do you think the fact that because of COVID, after the COVID season, a lot of salary caps were severely slashed? So a lot of caps, some caps are almost slashed in half, or 40, 50, 60K of salary cap was taken off. Do you think that because a lot of clubs were paying that much to begin with, they're now still trying to pay that much, even though the cap's maybe 40, 50 grand less, which is why maybe we're getting a bit more, these stories are getting a bit more traction?
Yeah, I think so. I think that COVID definitely affected everything in a lot of different ways. I think also that you got a lot of guys that during that COVID time weren't playing footy, were having to still, make a living. So what were they doing on Saturdays? They were going to work. They were, working on a Saturdays, and then they get, I can play footy again. But the last 2 years, I've been making $300-400 a day working on a Saturday. I'm now not going to play footy for anything less. Yep. Which that's created probably guys that would have played for free or played for the love of the game or the love of the club. They've just gone, hold on, I can't afford not to get paid on a Saturday. So if I'm going to play, I have to get paid, and it's got to be decent money.
So we've gone through the country. So we'll go through the Metro, and Metro is actually fairly. So the top divisions in Metro are all pretty much bang on. So Premier Division in Essendon District, 120. Premier or Division 1 in Northern, 120. Eastern Premier, 120. Southern Division 1, 120. And Western Division 1, 120. All up from 110 this past season. When you get to sort of Div 2, Div 3, Div 4, it does sort of change a little bit. So, like, for example, Southern Div 2 is 88, where Western Region Div 2 is 88. Essendon Div 1, which is their Div 2 is 100. Do you think because the fact that the Metro Leagues sort of police themselves and all sort of, especially we said it during COVID where they made the decisions together, that may be why their salary caps are all level, or do you reckon it's just a pure fluke?
No, I think it is something to do with the AFL Metro Leagues. I don't want to offend anyone, but they work together a bit nicer.
Yep.
They do try, try to have some consistency across the leagues in a sense, so that they're not, highly competing with each other. They're trying to work together to have some unity and some consistency across those leagues, so that there's no reason for some other league to be, way more successful than others and things like that. So it is, I think they do work together a lot more. I think the country leagues, being how spread out and how wide of areas they cover, they're a lot more on their own, and they don't want to work with the other leagues as well as much as the Metro leagues have to try and work together.
So the only league, that is top division that isn't 120, is the Riddle, and that's 105. But that's actually they're going to have a $20,000 jump up from what they had in 2023. But that just sort of feels to me that, being the fact that Riddle's not divisional football, it's just a sort of one division. That's maybe the only reason why that's a bit lower than the other top divisions. But yeah, when you sort of get into the bottom divisions, like for example, Eastern Division 4, $60K. That's a lot of money for Division 5 effectively. Southern Div 4 is 30. Now, we were involved at Southern, and Division 3 is 40. But this is where the jump is, right? From Division 3 in Southern to Division 2 in Southern, it's a $48,000 salary cap jump.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's a big reason we see clubs go up and down in divisional football, because if say you're a Division 3 club, right? You got $40K to work with. You pretty much max your cap. And by maxing your cap, you're maxing what your club can even afford to pay.
Yep.
Win a flag, brilliant. Probably going to get a little bit of extra income from sponsors potentially. But how do you compete with... You're then going to try and find double what you had for the original season, where clubs that have probably been in Division 2 for 10 years, trying to get that flag, are sort of spinning around that. How do you compete? And this is where it comes into what we talked about before, about how some blokes can demand so much money because a club can pay it when one club can't.
Yeah, and that's going to be the age-old problem in local footy, isn't it? And I think one of the biggest issues is not having juniors with a lot of these teams. And I think the more successful clubs in our local area with, you could argue they've been one of the most successful local clubs in most areas, and that's Cranbourne. They've been very widely successful across their time in Outer East, then going into Southern. They, first year in Southern, they win a flag. But go down to Cam's Reserve or Casey Fields or Livingston now, where they're based, on any night of the week, and you see how many kids they've got there playing footy and training. So they've got a great junior program that builds up. So there's probably a fair chunk of their players playing senior footy that have grew up playing for Cranbourne, don't even consider having to get paid to be loyal and stay at the club. On the contrast, you could go out to, let's say, Sandown.
Yep.
Haven't had juniors for a long time. The only way we could attract players to the club was to pay them. And you offer them, $100, $200 a game to come. They come for 1 year and they say, well, next year I want $300, $400. And if you don't pay it, they go elsewhere. So they'll go to the next club that's going to pay them, and it just continues on. And it's happening everywhere. Sandown's we're involved. We were involved, so we know. But there's a lot of clubs within Southern that don't have juniors.
A lot, and that's one thing they're trying to change.
And that's probably the biggest thing is if you have juniors and you have guys that are going to play for your team and they're going to be 1 point players because they grew up playing for your club, you got the advantage already. Then those teams that have juniors and are successful, inevitably they're going to have more money. Yep. Because they're successful, they're doing well, they got people who want to support them, so they're going to have more money so that they then can pay some players to keep them or pay some high-profile guys to come across.
We're going to get into the points now, but before we do, I just want to make this very, very clear. We're not knocking any salary cap the leagues have in place, any clubs that are lucky enough or have worked hard enough in their time to be able to pay the max salary cap, because I'm sure the people running the clubs, running the leagues, have more of an idea of the day-to-day runnings of how it all works than what we do. So don't think that we're sitting here and we're bashing these clubs and these leagues about their salary cap and clubs cheating salary caps. We're not. It's just a story that's come up, and it's a story that's, again, reared its head quite heavily this year. And in my personal opinion, right, if you're at a club and you can raise the funds or you have the money incoming to pay a full $130,000 salary cap, good on you. Absolutely. That's clubs work. I would have killed for the club I was involved in to be able to raise that amount of money. So I do know a lot of clubs, a lot of people will shit on the successful clubs that have managed to get that money coming in because they're successful, and they buy flags every year because they spend the max of their salary cap. Salary cap's there for a reason. If their club can manage to spend that money, why shouldn't they?
That's probably Aussies as a whole, isn't it? We tall poppy syndrome. You want to tear down the people that are doing better than you, and you see a club that's wildly successful, doing well, and you want to shit on them. But us at Sandown, we would look up to clubs like Coralline Cobras, who were doing really well, were raising a lot of money, have some great fundraising things they're able to do to sustain their club. And not only their club, but Terry Dillon, who goes on to help other clubs to try and emulate the success they have. And he's tried to help out many local footy clubs to try and raise money and emulate that. Fortunately, it doesn't work for everyone, but, and I wish I was able to have some of the success rates of money like they were.
And that's the other thing that the amount of work that goes into raising the money to spend the money is important as well. Like, you can have someone come in and be a money man, but that money's still going to be coming from within the community itself. So let's jump on to this point system, right? So we want to start with what a 6-pointer is or what a 1-pointer is and work our way up or down.
I'll go from 6.
All right. So a 6-pointer. So 6 points. Category is an AFL player. Played at least one AFL game in any of the current or previous 3 seasons. I find it pretty hard pressed to find an AFL player that's played a game in that season. That season's gone to play local footy a couple of weeks later, but it has happened. 5 points. State League Tier 1. So VFL, Waffle or Sandful. Played at least 5 senior games with VFL, Waffle or Sandful in any of the current previous 3 seasons. Now that's the one that I reckon catches a lot of local clubs out, because you have players, especially in Victoria, that maybe say are on Box Hill Hawks list, but then aligned with a local club that's not a home club. So it might be, say, play Box Hill, aligned to, say, South Croydon, but their junior club is Vermont. So that, being a South Croydon, that all of a sudden makes them a 5-pointer if they've played games. You'd be absolutely hard-pressed if you pick them up as a 4-pointer or whatever they are. When you pick them up, they've never played VFL. They then play really well and go play VFL for 3 games and then get dropped back to you. That would hurt you points-wise.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, but I think they have to be 5-pointers. They have to be considered that when they're if they're playing VFL, they're obviously got ambitions of trying to make it to the AFL as well. Like, so they're obviously talented players, and you can't be getting them for free.
No. So category 4, which is 4 points, which is NAB League or State League Tier 2, so Tasmania. So NAB League, which is the old TAC Cup, so under 18s, played at least 5 NAB League games in any of the current or previous 3 seasons. And then the State League 2 is same as the VFL level. So played at least 5 senior games in any of the current or previous 3 seasons. Now, the NAB League one, I find strange that that's 4 points. But not because it should be lower, but there's an argument that it could be lower, it could be higher. Because, especially over the past 3 seasons, like, you could, as you're fully aware, when it comes to those leagues, you can have actual genuine superstars play in NAB League, but then you can also have blokes that are just toll.
Yeah.
So I don't really know how, and the 3 seasons is a bit strange. You get a bloke that comes out of NAB League, he's played, say, got picked up by, say, Stingrays, played first 5 years, 5 games as an underage player. They've then worked out, okay, yeah, maybe you're not really much chop for us. He then holds on to 4 points for 3 more years.
Yeah. So that's where this point system is need to be refined a little bit, I think. But if you're good enough to get considered and even get onto a NAB list to begin with, you're probably deserved to be a 4-point player. Is it 3 years you should hold that for if you failed at it, and then, probably not?
I think it should be, in my opinion, it probably should be you're a 4-pointer while you're at NAB League, and then potentially a year after. I do understand how this is structured, though, because it's so much easier. At least it's not confusing. It's simple. You've played NAB League 5 games. Category 3, 3 points. Senior community player. Played the same or more senior than reserves games in total over the current and previous 3 seasons, and includes interstate community leagues, including the Northern Territory. Transferred junior. This one I actually didn't realise was 3 points. Transferred junior. Player recruited from an under-19s or younger competition and does not meet the Category 1 home club definition.
Yeah, see, that one's to, I guess, encourage loyalty to your club, isn't it? So that if you're going to swap clubs from your junior club and go elsewhere, you're going to be 3 points. If you stay at the club you're playing your under 18s, under 19s at, you'll stay at 1 point, won't you?
Yeah.
And I like that one.
Yeah, I think that's good. It wasn't until I was reading through this the other day, I was like, oh, it's actually, didn't realise that juniors was such a big thing. And it does stop. It stops clubs from going out and poaching the best under 18 players and building a team up from underneath. Like, I think that's good. And then the senior community player, no issue there. It makes sense. You've played at a high level, 3 points. Category 2, which is I find this one strange. Development community player. So if you've played more reserve games than senior games in total over the current and previous 3 seasons at community level. So if you've played reserves for, say you've been at a club and you've played 50 games and you've played 47 reserves games and 3 senior games, and then, again, I'm going to use the worst case scenario, the first 3 games you played were senior games and like, oh, you're actually not that good. You then play 47 reserves games. You then change clubs to try and play seniors. You become a 2-pointer.
Yeah.
It sort of makes sense that that's 2 points, but another argument, that could be 3, that could be 1, like, depending on where you're going.
Yeah, there could be a huge difference between a bloke who's missing out on a senior game in Div 1 than a bloke who's then going to play Div 4 seniors.
Yeah.
There's blokes that playing Division 4 anywhere seniors wouldn't even get a Resi's game in Division 1.
Yeah.
At all. Wouldn't even get looked at whatsoever. So if you're coming from up, going back down, you probably should be 3 or 4 points.
But again, it's one of those ones. It's black and white, easy done. So then the 1 pointer. This is the one where if clubs can do it and they can bring back. This is where a lot of clubs will probably pay overs for their AFL homegrown talent to bring them back because they are such a low point. So 1 point, a home player. Played 40 or more games over a minimum 3 seasons at the club or aligned junior club up to and including under 17 competition. Player who has played a minimum of 5 games in each of the five consecutive seasons for the club or aligned junior club up to and including under 19s. Player who has only played at that club or aligned junior club. Player who hasn't played competitive football in the previous 36 months. So what that says to me, so obviously if you haven't left the club, so I think was it Nathan Jones from Melbourne, Mount Eliza boy, played AFL, went back to Mount Eliza, comes as a 1 pointer. I find it strange that you can play 40 games for your junior club, go play somewhere else, might be one of the best players in the country, not AFL level, then come back to your home club and you're only 1 point.
Yeah. that's that real grey area one, isn't it?
I mean, it's good. I mean, the whole point of that is to try and get your homegrown talent to stay and come back to your club. It's just strange where you could spend, what is it? 3 don't know. You could play 9s, 10s, or 11s, leave there, go play 12s, 13s, 14s, 15s, 16s, 10 years of senior footy at somewhere else, but then come back to that club as a 1 pointer.
Yeah.
That's sort of where it comes like, oh, okay, it's good. I don't mind. I think the home player rule is a good one to have in, especially for the ex-AFL players coming back in. But yeah, they only have to play 40 games. So what's that, Actually, in reality, 40 games, as you think about it, at junior level is actually quite a fair bit because you're sort of only playing 14 to 16 games at junior level a season without finals. So it's actually 3-4 seasons. That's actually, okay. So what are your thoughts on how we work the points? Man, I think the points cap is about 44 for most leagues, I think.
Yeah, it's around that 45, something like that, 44.
So you only need a couple, 1 6-pointer and a couple of 5s and 4s, and you're in all sorts of stuff trying to fill your team.
Yeah, and I think a lot of clubs probably get stuck is they just try and recruit the best players they can, not accounting for the points whatsoever until they're then going to put in their team sheet and go, oh, shit, hold on, we're going to hit the cap here. I know there's probably some clubs that have come close to going over that points cap in recent seasons.
So there's actually, I forgot to scroll down there, because there's actually additional points that can be picked up as well. So additional penalty player points as it's referred to, additional 1 point. If transferring from another community club and we've competed against their immediate former club, does not include Category 2 development community players. So if you played reserves, no issue. Metropolitan leagues and regions may increase this to additional 2 player points subject to approval by AFL Victoria. So if you're going from, say, let's go Noble Park to Rowville, but maybe Rowville's your junior club, you're still going to pick up an extra point. I think that's good. I think that sort of keeps clubs from trying to poach from within their league to try and strengthen themselves and weaken another one. Additional 1 point is transferring from a club located in a premier competition to a club in a non-premier competition.
Yeah, okay.
Does not apply to Category 3 transfer junior, Category 5 state league player. That's a strange one.
So that's if you're playing Resi's up in Eastern Premier, you can't go back to Div 4 without copping an extra point. Yeah,
that makes sense actually, because otherwise clubs would actually just try and get those players in and go. Additional 1 point. Now this is the one where I reckon it can catch a lot of players out, a lot of clubs out. If registered at 3 or more different community clubs in the current or previous 2 seasons, does not include players moving on permit, e.g. VFL, NAB League, or local interchange agreement. So that's...
Well, that's an interesting one because I reckon there's quite a fair few players that travel up north that be playing under permits to go up Darwin, up in some of these comps that get played.
Doesn't include that. So does not include players moving on permit, e.g.
Yeah, no, so that's what I'm saying. So there'd be guys that are playing down here, decent level footy, get recruited to go up north to play, a handful of games to qualify for finals and play finals up north. And they're doing that all on a permit and then come back down here. And then, it's a pretty decent comp up there. And get some high profile recruits, and then you could come back down and you haven't accumulated any points from playing in that competition. So that's interesting.
So that's the accumulation of extra points. And then you can, obviously, the deduction for player points. So deduct 1 point for each season of service to the club, minimum 5 senior or reserve games per season, even if not in consecutive years, until the player reaches 1 point. Note, if the player is eligible for underage football at that club, it must play 5 senior games to meet the criteria for a year of service. Okay, so that means that if a kid comes into your club as a 17-year-old, they're playing senior, or 16-year-old playing senior footy, that 1 year doesn't count for their... Is that right?
So if you're recruiting a guy to let's say under 19s, and you recruit him then when he goes to play seniors, he'd have the points.
Yeah, so he has to have played 5 senior games at that year. Yeah, okay, makes sense.
He wouldn't lose a point. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the definition of junior aligned clubs, pretty self-explanatory, where seniors and juniors exist under the same constitution, or where there is a memorandum, I don't know, of understanding in place between standalone senior and junior clubs as approved by leagues. So there's also a couple of notes on this thing. So note, metro leagues and region may reassess an individual player points classification where it is deemed inappropriate based on playing history, or where a player qualifies in more than one category based on their playing history in the previous 3 seasons. The category with the highest points will apply, hence the flow chart. So it means that no real way of dodging it. So I think, that the points could be refined a bit more to sort of make it a bit easier, a bit better. But I think realistically, if you're reading that for the first time, makes complete sense. There's no confusing words. It's pretty straightforward, to the point, and very understandable. So for a club, I feel like if a club was turn around and say, I didn't quite understand how this point system, how that's only 3 points, well, you should read it again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's the interesting one is the ex-AFL players.
Yeah.
Because they come across as 6 points to their first club they go to. And let's say they go to Yarrawonga and they play in a couple flags up in Yarrawonga, play for a couple of years, they're losing points each year. They probably still should be a 6-pointer if they go somewhere else. You know what I mean? But they're going to lose points just because they've stayed. And let's be honest, some of these AFL players, they might be signed to one club and play the 8 games or whatever it is to that one club, but then they're playing every second game somewhere else as a cashier and doing their sportsman's night. So they're still getting around and playing a lot of other footy on permits and stuff as well. So that's where it's...
Yeah, I feel like the AFL player one's also... There's such a wide... you can have an AFL player that comes out the system at 35, 36, who's, for lack of a better word... For lack of a better word, past it, right?
Yep. Or
you could have a bloke that left AFL on his own accord, just didn't want to play AFL like Kyle Martin did from, I think he left for Collingwood at 23. They're the same points.
Yeah.
Like, you got a 40-year-old or a 22-year-old that are the same points. Like, I do understand that normally if you're playing AFL, you're playing up until you get delisted. And if you're leaving AFL at 35, 40, you've had a good year and you've probably a star at the game compared to a bloke being delisted at 23.
Yeah, it's almost like each player needs to be assessed on their own individual careers, isn't it? Like you said, you could have a guy who's made it to the AFL. He's been on an AFL list for 3, 4, 5 years. He's played a handful of senior games, but he's in and out of the team. Or you could have a guy like Favola who, not by his choice, he was sort of booted out of the league a little bit prematurely. He's gone on to play in some local footy grand finals and absolutely dominate local footy. Is not comparable to some young kid that didn't make it in the AFL.
Yeah. I think I have a slight feeling that this subject matter from October to April every year is just going to be something that comes up, and now they've got the compliance managers, they call it, that come in and check the books of all the premiership clubs, and which is fine, but the issue with only checking the premiership clubs is that you could have clubs that are just behind them doing worse things that don't get looked at. But how do you get every single club in the state looked at? You can't. It's just impossible.
It's impossible. And there's how many different teams across all these leagues. It's a pretty huge task to even consider. But it's also, it's not in the league's best interest.
No.
To put the money towards these kind of things and try and, police every little thing. Like, there's got to be some level of, respect and as somebody running a club, just some, pride in playing fair and actually, winning a flag on your own merits and doing the right things. It's always disappointing when you see a team that wins a flag because they've recruited a handful of players, and then the very next year, those players are all gone.
Yeah,
that to me, the flag almost becomes meaningless, doesn't it?
You can do, yeah.
Yeah, and we've seen it time in, time out where that's happened, and if you're playing local footy and, your goal is to win flags, like anyone that's playing footy, any sport, you want to win a flag, a championship or whatever your sport calls it, if you're going to win a flag and then disappear off into the wilderness and you're not going to rock up to the 10-year reunion, the 20-year reunion, then what is the bloody point in it?
Exactly right. And you can sit there and say that it's local footy, it's not all about, you don't play for sheep stations. I get that at a certain level, but at the same time, when you're playing at the highest level for your club, you rely on your team being successful to have sponsorship money coming in, your gate and your bar revenue on a Saturday, because you can guarantee that if you're going to have your regulars that always come down, but if your team's being successful and winning games and on the verge of a premiership, more people from the local community are going to get involved. And then you've got, think about an extra 4 weeks of nights at the club. You win a premiership, your best and fairest night becomes even bigger and better. Like, there's a lot of things that winning a premiership does for a local club. Yeah. And clubs will spend the money because they know they can get that money back if they're successful. And the same as any sporting club at the professional level. When they're successful, more money comes in because more people are paying to go watch them. Like, look at Melbourne. Melbourne had a lot of MCC members, but when they were probably one of the worst teams ever, no one was rocking up. They all of a sudden start becoming good. Yeah. Crowd starts rocking up. It's not a lot of people would not say, oh, you're not a real fan if you're not going to games when they're losing. It's like, well, so what? No, it's nature. It's a thing. If your team's not going too well, you get disheartened. It becomes hard. Your mental health suffers because you're like, why would I want to go waste? Okay, you might have a membership, and that's the thing. You've got a membership. You're paying money to that club regardless, but you don't want to spend $100 getting in and out of a city to watch your team get beat by 100 points.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll probably, before we wrap this one up, speaking of salary caps and points, a couple of clubs I want to know if you think this is a piss take or if these clubs are being serious about this and what your thoughts are. Local clubs announcing they've signed players on 4 to 5 year deals.
Yeah.
Like,
it's a pretty old one.
my theory is it's surely a club, little bit of sense of humour because of what's happening in the media with all these big clubs and going, let's just muck around and put this bloke out for 5 years for a bit of a laugh. Like I work in the social media circle on clubs, and that's something that I would be, let's do it. As a thought, let's get it out. Let's get a little bit of a laugh going about it within the group. But there's also part of me that thinks it could be serious.
Yeah, mate, good on him. If a bloke is willing to say, you know what, I will sign on for 5 years and stay at this club, good.
Problem is, though, as you know, mate, local footy contracts aren't.
Nah, they're not ironclad. They're blokes that sign on for 1 year, you can just, 4 or 5 games in, go stuff here and go elsewhere. But, yeah, like you said, if it's done with a bit of sense of humour, but also good luck to them. I hope some of these guys follow through and stay on at these clubs for 4 or 5 years, and because it's all for the better of the game.
Yeah.
If you do have guys that are willing to come to your club and say, you know what, I'm going to commit 3. Let's say it's 3, not even 5. 3 years I'm going to commit because I want to win a flag with this bunch of guys, with this coach and at this team. That's for the better of local footy to me.
And the other thing with that, right? Okay, so the club puts up, if sign a player, we'll go 3 years, right? So we'll go 3 years. Sign this player for 3 years. People on the outside, why are you announcing 3-year contracts? What a joke this is. Flip it around. Their club has signed a bloke bet for 3 years. They'd be commenting on that same Facebook post being like, look at us, we've signed this great deal. He's secured for 3 years. We're going to get going. Like, and that's, people find any reason to pot shot local clubs that aren't theirs. Let's be honest.
100%. And so I've got a list here of all these players that are recruited to different clubs. And the one thing that disappoints me when you read through this list and they're listing all the other clubs that they've played at, like, to me, that's disappointing when we've recruited this great guy. Like, he's an unreal player, but he's played at 5 different clubs in the last 5 years. So as a supporter of that club, I'm not going, this is going to be amazing. We've just signed such and such. He's going to be our saviour. Well, he might be lucky to do a year with us and then he'll piss off somewhere else.
The only time I feel like from a club's a supporter's point of view of a club, you're saying, okay, this bloke's played at 5 different clubs for 5 years. If you know that having that bloke come in, he's only going to be there for probably that 1 season, is probably the missing piece to you winning a premiership. That's about the only. But then again, comes the thing: is he going to rock up to the reunions? Is he going to put the money back into the club? Probably not. But again, I can't knock a bloke for going, I'm making money playing footy. Like, it's work at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's it. Everyone's doing it for their own reasons. I'm old school. I like a bit of loyalty to a club. I like to see guys that play a career, and a disappointing one is when you see a bloke's won a best and fairest and then he's gone to another club. Like, yeah, that's sort of disappointing. You think especially if the team's doing well, if you win a flag and a best and fairest, and why wouldn't you want to go again? And I know, one of the biggest local footy stars to our area has been Mark Holt.
Yeah.
The guy's kicked 1,500 plus goals for Cranbourne. He's then ended up going and play for a couple other teams, but his heart's always been at Cranbourne.
Well, he went for Cranbourne, went to Kringle, played a season at Kringle, come back to Cranbourne, and now he's gone to Lang Lang. But he's also close, knocking on 40. That's the other thing.
Owes Cranbourne absolutely nothing.
Exactly. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that guy has probably had offers his whole career from other clubs. Probably, when you're kicked 500 goals in a few years, you're going to get the offers coming to him. But he stuck around a cranny. Yeah, he then went off to Kringle and whatever. But, he's been one of the biggest stars of local footy. There's not too many other blokes that have kicked more goals than him.
And that's the other thing as well, when you talk about these blokes signing or staying, bring a premiership or whatever. If it's literally one and done, they're out, you're just like, come on, mate. But if it's a bloke that, he's been at the club for 6-7 years, just feeling like, okay, I need a bit of a change. And the thing that a lot of people don't even take into account is a bloke could just simply be moving.
Yeah.
A bloke could simply be moving from, let's go from, say, Keilor, could be moving to Langwarrin. Well, you're probably not going to stay playing a Keilor, are you?
Yeah.
So anyway, I reckon that might wrap us up for this episode, mate. We've absolutely just covered the absolute crap out of this, and I had a few other things I wanted to get to in this episode, but they might wait for maybe next week or the week after. But Rifty, thanks for joining me again, mate, and we'll see you on the next episode of Talking Grassroots. Remember, it comes out every Thursday. Get it from wherever you find your podcast, Spotify, watch it on YouTube, tell your mates about us, and can't look forward to another good year of local footy.
Thank you.